All right, what is happening? How's everyone doing today? My name is Chuck and welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're going to be hopping into my top Warzone meta loadouts. We're going to be taking a look at the best weapons out there and giving you guys the best setups for them. These are going to be the top tier guns in Warzone, so hopefully you guys enjoy today's video. If you guys think you're going to, make sure you guys hit the like in the next 5 seconds for some good luck and subscribe with all the notifications turned on. I'm on the road to 800,000 subscribers and it'd be amazing if you join the squad. Okay, so the first gun we're going to hop into here is obviously the one that's on the thumbnail. We're going to be jumping into the Krig 6 as this is like the most meta AR out there. All the pro players use this when they're in tournaments because the different stuff like the stoner gets banned. I already covered the stoner last time, so I don't want to cover it this time. But yeah, I mean, you guys should just always be using the Krig 6 anyways until that thing gets nerfed. I mean, it's just like the Cold War, you know, laser beam. So you guys should use this gun anyways. First thing on here is that agency suppressor. This is indeed an AR, so we have to go ahead and use the agency as opposed to the regular suppressor. The regular suppressor is geared towards SMGs and close range weapons, and the agency is geared towards, you know, medium to longer range stuff, which is what we're using this AR for. So definitely go ahead and throw on the agency. Next up is going to be that barrel section, and we are going to throw on that 19.7 Ranger for that increased bullet velocity and recoil control. I have tried the CMV mil spec, and while it is definitely pretty good, it has a little bit too many cons for me. And I talked to a bunch of my friends and they were definitely recommending the Ranger. I put it on, you know, a few weeks back and I've been using it ever since, and I will not stop using that Ranger barrel pretty much for anything unless it somehow gets really nerfed. So I'd highly suggest you guys go and throw that on there. Next up, we're going to skip the underbarrel, go to the ammunition, and we're going to throw on that beautiful 60 round magazine. I'm a 60 round magazine kind of guy. You already know what I'm talking about here. And I mean, it's just the best thing out there. There's no reason to run a fast mag on this. The Krig reloads perfectly fine. You just need as much ammunition in there as possible, as this is a gun you're going to be laying down the trigger on for probably extended periods of time as you're trying to pick people off at that medium to longer range. So having extra rounds in the magazine is going to be incredibly beneficial, and highly suggest you guys run the Stenag 60. Now we're going to jump into that rear grip section here, and what we're going to do is we're going to throw on that Serpent Wrap for the increased ADS time. This is going to slightly hinder our sprint to fire time, which is entirely okay. Getting that ADS speed boost is a lot more worth it to have on this gun, so I would definitely say to run the Serpent Wrap on here. This is probably my go-to, you know, rear grip attachment for a lot of my ARs, kind of like the stipple grip tape for the Modern Warfare guns. So I would definitely run the Serpent Wrap on here. And for our last attachment on this Krig 6, we're gonna go throw on an optic, of course, and we're gonna throw on that axle arms 3 times. You pretty much can't go wrong running the axle arms for any type of situation. I have seen people go ahead and run the Royal Cross 4 times, and it's definitely a good optic. But I'll tell you what, I mean, the axle arms doesn't zoom in too much for me as opposed to the Royal Cross 4, which I feel like zooms in a little bit too much. And I just really like the axle arms. It's great for all situations, even sometimes at very close ranges. If you get caught off guard, you'll still be okay because it doesn't zoom in nearly enough to where it's going to hinder you from like tracking a target, which is awesome. So overall, definitely recommend this Krig 6 build here. If you guys want to, you can definitely swap out the rear grip for something like, you know, a field agent, you know, foregrip. And that is definitely awesome as well. Hope you guys enjoyed this build. So now let's hop into the most meta SMG here for Warzone, which is going to be the OTS-9, whether you like it or you don't. I mean, listen, the OTS-9 is just the most meta thing out there right now. It beats out the MAC-10, beats out the Bullfrog. It's just too good. I was slow on leveling mine up. I didn't want to put the time into it, but as soon as I did, I was thankful I did because it is so good. So first thing on this is going to be that groove suppressor. The OTS has some interesting recoil, so we're not really trying to deal with that sound suppressor. Like, you can get away with using the sound suppressor on maybe some of the other SMGs that don't have a lot of recoil, but this definitely has some recoil. Even I'm playing, you know, on PC 120 FOV and it makes it look like I have less recoil, it still definitely has some, so you definitely have to use the groove suppressor. Next up, we're going to that barrel section. We're going to use that 8.1 task force for the effective damage range, bullet velocity, and strafe speed. Overall, the best barrel you guys can possibly use for this thing. I wouldn't really recommend anything else. I mean, I guess you could use the, you know, the 7.5 VDV reinforce up until you get the task force, but at that point when you get the task force, permanently switch over and you'll thank me later. Now in the laser section, what we're going to do is we're going to throw on that Tiger Team Spotlight, and I'll tell you guys this right now. I've seen some comments talking about the Tiger Team versus the Bruiser Grip because they largely do the same thing, though you're going to pretty much have a little bit more visibility to enemies when you're using that Tiger Team. So if you're really self-conscious about having any type of visibility to the enemy with your flashlight, then I guess you can definitely go and use the Bruiser Grip and it'll work pretty good as well. But for me personally, I really like the Tiger Team. I feel like it's definitely a little bit better. It gives you a tad bit more mobility, which I really like. So if I was you guys, stick with the Tiger Team, and if you're in a tournament or something like that, swap over to the bruiser, and that will eliminate you from being seen by other, top tier players. But if you're playing pubs, the average person's not really going to pick this out too much, so I just, say use the Tiger Team. Now for the ammunition, what we're going to do is, this is not something that I normally recommend, but we're going to throw on that VDV 40 round fast mag. And the reason we're throwing this on here as opposed to the regular Spetsnaz 40 is because the reload, obviously if you use the ground loot, it's a little bit chalked, and we don't want to deal with that anymore. So we're going to use that 40 round fast mag. Considering this only has 40, it's got a high rate of fire. We're going to have to reload this thing here pretty often. So I would just definitely say always run the fast mag on this thing, the 40 round fast mag. Don't switch to anything else. It is going to do you dirty if you switch to something else. Always run this. Last, definitely not least, we're going to go ahead and use that KGB skeletal stock. And this is one of those things where you can use this or the Spetsnaz stock right here, but it's kind of negligible on what you think is going to be better. It comes down to a little bit more personal preference. It's not like one is, the almighty god tier stock. It just comes down to, do you like the Spetsnaz? Do you like the KGB a little bit more? Do you want a little bit more sprint to fire time versus in walking movement speed? You just have to try it out for yourself and see what you think is better. I personally like the skeletal stock. Just, that's always what I've been running on a lot of my SMGs, ARs, even if I happen to throw it on an AR. Just go ahead and try this out here. I'd recommend it. I think it's overall an amazing attachment, and this is my full OTS9 build. Definitely the best SMG out there right now, my go-to for pretty much all my setups, and you guys should definitely be using this if you're not already. Now we're moving over to a gun that you guys are probably looking at me and being like, hey, Chuck, what is this? And it's the Ram 7, and pretty much nobody's talked about the Ram 7 here for a minute, but I'll tell you what, I was using this the other day, and I was unbelievably surprised. I even had to ask JGod. I was like, hey, did this thing get stealth buffed or something like that? Because it is criminally underrated for how good it actually is. And he said, no, it didn't get stealth buffed. It didn't get touched or anything like that. It's just always been that good. So I was like, man, I really got to start using the Ram 7 again because it's just really good. So first thing on here is going to be that muzzle, and we're going to throw on that mono. This is just pretty much like what you have to do for the modern warfare weapons. You can't run the lightweight, the tactical. It's not like the Cold War ones where you actually have a benefit or it's actually useful to run one of those other ones. You just always have to run the mono on pretty much every single thing here in Warzone for modern warfare stuff. So just go ahead and run that. Next up, we're going to move over to that barrel section, and we're going to throw on that FSS Ranger. Damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control. It's the heaviest barrel out there. We're not trying to make this like a sniper support, though I have seen people do that. This is just ultimately going to offer you just better recoil control, which is obviously better, and we want to be able to hit our shots at a bit of a longer distance. So the FSS Ranger is going to be my go-to here. Next up, we're moving to that underbarrel, and what we're going to do here is we're going to throw on that Commando foregrip. This is not going to chalk our ADS speed too much. What this is going to do is help us stabilize our recoil, but it's not going to make it so that we lose a ton of mobility like with the Merc foregrip, the tactical, the Ranger, the operator. That's a bunch of shenanigans out there. You don't need that. So just run the Commando on here. I've tested all this stuff out myself personally, and I just recommend to always run the Commando on the Ram 7. Let's move over to that ammunition now. So we have one option in here. It's a 50 round magazine. I'd love for it to be a 60. Hey, listen, don't get me wrong. 60 would be prime. It'd be perfect for this thing. But 50 is all we got, so we got to make do with what we're given, and that's indeed going to be the 50. So we're going to throw that on there, and then to finish this whole build off, we're going to go into the optic section, and you guys have a couple of different ways you can outfit this build. So for me personally, I love running the Corp Combat Hollow sight, and that's what I was actually dropping a bunch of kills with here in a gameplay that I have coming up. But listen, that Corp Combat Hollow is really, really good for rebirth, for that closer to medium range. If you're playing this as a sniper support, definitely throw that on there. If you want to use this as a primary AR, throw on that VLK 3x optic, and you can really run the same exact build, but just swap out the sight. It'll be entirely functional in a different way, which is awesome. So go ahead and run either or of them. For me, I'm going to choose that Corp Combat Hollow, and overall, this is my Ram 7 build here. Love the Ram 7. Definitely underrated. You guys should be using it more because it's really good. Now let's jump into a gun that I think has to be put into this video, which is the Bullfrog, and that's just because it's got no recoil, it's got a large magazine, and pretty much every single player out there is going to like using the Bullfrog for those two reasons alone, and it's also an SMG in Cold War, and you can level it up pretty quickly, so you got some pretty solid attachments here. First thing on that muzzle category is going to be the sound suppressor. We're trying this out here today. I've been using it a lot recently. I definitely think it's the wave for the Bullfrog in particular. Not necessarily something like the Mac 10, but the Bullfrog works really, really well for. So definitely throw on that sound suppressor, and this will take care of you guys here. I love the sound suppressor on this thing. Been using it a lot more recently, and it is incredible. So we're going to throw that on there. Next up in that barrel section, we're going to go down to the bottom here for that 7.4 task force, effective damage range, bullet velocity, and strafe speed. This says it's going to give you vertical and horizontal recoil, but we all know that's a bunch of shenanigans. It doesn't impact your recoil at all. It's not going to. Even if you're on console, you know, as opposed to, you know, PC 120 FOV where it looks like stuff has less recoil, I mean, it's not going to impact you. So just go and run that 7.4 task force and you'll be good. Next up in that laser section, like we did for the OTS, we're going to throw on the Tiger Team Spotlight, movement speed, aim walking movement speed. The more you can move around in close quarter situations, the less likely you are to get hit. And of course, the less likely you're to get hit, the less likely someone's going to take off plates and down you, so on and so forth. You're going to go ahead and live longer. And that is awesome. We're trying to live longer here in Warzone. Now in the rear grip section, which is going to be our fourth attachment, we're going to throw on that serpent wrap here because we're going to use this since we just don't have to use an attachment on the magazine. The magazine's a 50 round magazine, which is awesome for an SMG as base. So we don't need to waste an attachment on increasing our magazine size or messing with it at all. So we're going to throw that over here to the rear grip to give us a little bit more mobility and ADS time. And this is going to make you an absolute machine when it comes to ADSing because we also have that sound suppressor. So that serpent wrap is going to be awesome and I'd highly, highly recommend it. And then for our last attachment on this thing, we're going to throw on that KGB skeletal stock. Increase ADS firing move speed, aim walking movement speed, and sprint to fire time. It gives you the con of hip fire accuracy, but I'll tell you what, who's hip firing the bullfrog? Not me. I don't be doing that stuff. Listen, it just isn't it. We don't be hip firing that bullfrog. We ADS pretty much 9 times out of 10. The occasional, you know, you down somebody, you go over, you know, finish them off. You don't got your throwing knife anymore. You can hip fire them, you know, then. But when it actually counts, you want to be ADS. So overall, this is my bullfrog build here. Love the bullfrog. I mean, it's pretty much between that, you know, the Mac 10 and of course the OTS 9 as like my prime SMGs. Okay, now we're going to talk about this gun here, which is the Modern Warfare MP5. And this thing did, technically speaking, get nerfed, but there is a sort of stealth buff that happened to it, which is making it actually good. Though the caveat is you don't have as much ammo, and we'll get into that here in just a second. So the first thing on here we're going to throw on that muzzle is we're going to go actually throw on the monolithic suppressor on the end of the gun. Personally, this is my preference here. I like the way it looks. I feel like it functions ever so slightly better than using the integral monolithic in the barrel section. I just like this one. It works for me perfectly fine. So if I was you guys, go ahead and try this out here. It's not going to make that much of a difference between using the integral versus the one on the end of the gun. It kind of comes down to a little bit more aesthetic, you know, preference. And for me, the mono on the end of the gun is going to be better for me. So I just really, really like that. So I'm going to throw it on there. Next up, we're going to go into the underbarrel section, and we're actually going to use the PERK foregrip for that increased recoil control to hip fire accuracy. This is the one gun where I'd recommend running a PERK because the MP5 has such great hip fire accuracy that we're trying to accentuate that a little bit more, and the PERK foregrip is going to do that for us. So I'd highly recommend you guys use the PERK foregrip. And then in the ammunition, this is what I'm talking about here. So normally speaking, pre-patch, I recommend the 45 round magazine, but they pretty much nerfed that. What they kind of stealth buffed was the 10mm auto 30 round mag. So I'm actually going to recommend to you guys to use this here if you want to get some better, you know, TTK with the MP5, or you still want to be able to use this gun. You just can't use the 45 round on it anymore. You're going to get outgunned by a large majority of the other SMGs that are in the meta right now, like those top other 3 I mentioned. So I just recommend doing this. And then we're going to move over here to the stock section, and we're going to go and throw on the FTAC collapsible for the increased movement speed and aim down sight speed. This is overall really, really solid, and I love the FTAC collapsible. It's just incredibly good on this gun. Just makes me feel like I'm moving around incredibly fast, and I like that a lot. Now we're gonna have one attachment slot after this, and that's gonna be, we're gonna throw on a perk, which is going to be Sleight of Hand. And you guys know that this doesn't reload super fast, and we also only have 30 rounds in the magazine. So if you're using this for something other than solos, Sleight of Hand is going to be a must, and I'd highly recommend you guys use Sleight of Hand. You must use it. I mean, it's pretty much like a 100% you have to use this on your class. I feel like I'm just going to get caught too off guard too many times when I can't reload fast enough. And now that I only have 30 rounds in the magazine, this is pretty much what you have to do now. So overall, this is my MP5 build. Hope you guys have enjoyed today's video. That's my top 5 Warzone meta loadouts. If you guys enjoyed this thing, give it a like, subscribe if you're brand new, and just run out triple cap, don't be Randy, and I'm out. Peace.